Well, hey everyone. I hope your weekend was good. And what we're looking at here is now we're going to be diving into nonverbal communication. So last week we looked at the verbal side of things. This week we dive into the other aspect of that. And so to better understand what nonverbal is, I think it's important to understand its difference from verbal communication. So, verbal communication is our written or spoken words that we use to communicate with one another. Nonverbal is everything else, essentially, when it pertains to communication. It's our gestures, it's our hand movements, it's our, other gestures would be like nodding our head, or it'll be something along the lines of pointing or something like that. But there's other sides to nonverbals beyond just gestures. There's voice inflection. There's the what we're wearing, the context of, or maybe where we're at. Like if we're at our home, maybe you see the decorations in our home. There's many different sides to it that we see. The big thing about nonverbal communication is that it enhances our verbal communication. So it's something that it doesn't compete with it, but it adds to it. So verbal communication is highly effective, but it becomes so much more effective at communicating what we want to when we enhance it with the nonverbal side of things. An important aspect to understand too here is that nonverbals can contradict our verbal communication. With our words, we may say something, but with the nonverbals, it'll say something different. We may say that we're perfectly fine when someone asks what's wrong with us, but our facial expression can explain something very different if we're scowling or looking mad. And so it's important to understand that they are different. They're used to complement one another, but when they don't align, then that communicates to someone that there's maybe something distrustful happening here. To better understand nonverbal communication, we'll look at what the book identifies as the principles of nonverbal. Big things that happen here is that when we interact with verbal messages, our nonverbals provide feedback to other people. And so when we hear something, when somebody says something to us, we usually provide some sort of feedback with the nonverbal. This especially takes place when it's happening face to face. Online communication, we miss out on a little bit of that. That doesn't necessarily take place because you don't have those nonverbals set up. So there are other ways that maybe you could see nonverbals in online communication. That could be in timeliness of responses. If you're not responding to somebody, that usually sends some sort of message. Or if you are responding very fast to somebody's messages, that could communicate something. Other ways could be emojis, those kind of things. We also use nonverbals to manage our impressions. This is important to understand because we use those nonverbals to give off our perception of ourselves to other people. And so, for example, we may smile to appear more happy, like we're enjoying something. You may keep a straight face if you're trying to, like, let's say you're playing poker. You want to keep your poker face on. You don't want to show any emotion because it might give away your cards. And so we're constantly using these to manage our impressions. Another aspect would be create immediacy. So we use our nonverbals to be able to communicate how close we are in relationship with someone. And so someone you're very close with, you might touch them more. You might get closer as far as space goes. If you're in a romantic relationship, then you'll definitely be much closer. And so these are things that we could use to get closer with someone is by using our nonverbals. And that goes into our forming of our relationships. As you form those relationships, as those stages build, you'll be using different types of nonverbal communication. Nonverbal could also be used to structure the conversation. Right now, I could use my hand movements to indicate that we're moving to another point. You might also use nonverbals to identify, hey, let's move over there. Let's have the conversation over here. Or, hey, stop for a second. You might use your hand, stop. These are ways that you could use it to structure the conversation as you communicate. So next time you sit in a lecture in a classroom, see how maybe the teacher uses those to structure a conversation. Nonverbals are also a very good method to be able to influence other people, but also inversely to deceive. We use it in persuasion, and if persuasion is used correctly, then we influence other people to act in a way that we want to. If it's used deceptively, then we are using nonverbals intentionally to deceive somebody to get something out of them. And so nonverbals are a great way to be able to use that to influence. So, for example, speakers that speak faster at a faster pace, which that pace is a form of nonverbal, they are actually viewed in America as more knowledgeable, more trustworthy. So you might use that pace to be able to be more convincing to somebody. So next time you're trying to get something or persuade someone to think a certain way, speaking faster might be a way to influence that. Other ways nonverbals could be used is also to express our emotions. Very much so does our emotions come through with this. Our face is a very complex structure of muscles that we use deliberately to be able to communicate those emotions. There are, I think, over 100 different muscles groups just in the face alone. And so here you see a very complex structure that is used for something so intense. And humans are the only ones that communicate with nonverbals in this way, with this intensity. Other animals use nonverbals and facial structures to communicate, but no other animal has the same face structure like we do. When you understand the principles of things, then you can kind of understand and move into looking at the channels in which we use our nonverbal communication. A big one is going to be our body, the way we position our body. Are you leaning? Are you slunched over? Maybe you're looking uninterested that way. But the face is a huge one. As we talked about it just earlier on the last slide, your face is going to be a huge communicating. There's two different types of smiles. There's a smile we do, when we're trying to do a selfie or something. But then there's our genuine smile, and that's something where somebody makes you laugh, you see something enjoyable. They're different smiles, and we actually, as humans, pick up on that pretty perceptively. And so our face has a huge thing to do with that. Same thing goes for our eyes and eye contact. Here in America, people enjoy about 70% of eye contact when speaking with a speaker. However, when you're in a face-to-face interaction, a close conversation with someone, that changes a little bit. Typically, we like about a little bit over a second worth of eye contact before breaking. So it's not long before we tend to be able to break away. And then you come back, you make eye contact for a little bit, and it's kind of a back and forth kind of thing. However, context and culture have a huge influence on this. For example, in Japan, prolonged eye contact could be viewed as a disrespect. Another thing is touch. So touch is another form of nonverbal. You may touch someone's shoulders to give them sympathy when they're going through some sort of hardship. You may shake someone's hand when you meet them. There's different forms of touch, and each time they mean something different. Another one, and we're not going to have time to go over all of these, but some other important ones to consider is like space. Space has something to do with that. So how far apart are you from someone? That typically indicates something. So when you may be far away from somebody in a less intimate situation. So for example, in a classroom, the teacher may be up in the front of the classroom, and there's 12 plus feet between them and the students. But if you're having a one-on-one conversation with a friend about something, you'll be much closer in space. And so those are things to consider, because all of a sudden, if you have this friendship and you're having this conversation, but you're super far away, that's going to communicate something to them, that you don't want to talk to them or you're avoiding them for some reason. Artifacts are another thing. So artifacts are the things that we use to communicate. So, for example, our clothes are forms of that. We communicate the type of person and our style through that. Or how you decorate your home. So say you invite someone over to your home and your house has different types of artwork, or there's some sort of decorations. Those are all communicating something to the other person. Improving. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I look forward to our discussions later this week. Thank you very much, and continue to improve upon your nonverbal communication. Thank you.